To say that my family is tied to Epstein is an understatement. These people are one and the same. So now I have to think, with the release of all this exposed, when I have suffered probably a dozen assassination attempts, of course Epstein has been behind it. I filed a lawsuit in France against my father and Judith for incest because my mother also sexually abused me. And they blackmailed me because, yes, I had a drug problem. I was being trafficked to Harvey Weinstein. I had to cope with my pain somehow. In a perfect world, I would like them to interview Harvey Weinstein and just flat out ask him, did this woman sell you her daughter? They did everything to corrupt my case so that I couldn't testify against Weinstein and to put me in a psychiatric hospital the rest of my life or dead.
Hello and welcome to Ego is Here. Today I'm joined by Paz de la Huerta, an extraordinary artist, actress, abuse survivor, and whistleblower whose courage has resonated far beyond the screen. She has faced profound challenges, endured abuse, and chose to speak out against powerful systems that often silence survivors. This space is here so Paz can share her story in her own words. So by listening and sharing her journey, we help build a world where survivors are heard, protected, and supported. Hello, Paz.
Hi,
Thank you so
Anna.
much for being here.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Well, lately it's been a very emotional time because let's just say everyone I expected to be in the Epstein files are in the Epstein files. And I have dealt my entire life with deceit, lies, and corruption. And it continues, it continues there. I am so familiar with my family, and my family are Satanists, like Jeffrey Epstein. These people, let's be clear, they are satanic, and they don't have any conscience. They don't. I'm Catholic. I'm Christian, right? These people worship a different kind of God that doesn't have any conscience nor like I read something about a God they worship. There's no law, completely lawless. I mean, these people have gone criminal lengths to silence me, including assassination attempts. And honestly, I'm exhausted these days. These days, I a big part of how they started the abuse, which started very early on, was by drugging me since I was a child, right? My father started giving me alcohol at probably 5 years old. Yeah. And that made me very vulnerable to what he was doing to me in my sleep. And then Judith, my mother, whose whole cover up is that she works for the United Nations and, helps women in third world countries. This woman is in many ways worse than my father because she's the most manipulative. And she started, Judith and Christina, who are both in the Epstein files, I will note, had complete control over my life up until I ran away 4 years ago. Yeah.
Paz, take me back. You've described feeling managed rather than protected as a child. So, what did that look like day to day?
Well, I would say that it's very sad that you know, it's beautiful and that it's sad, right? It's a beautiful thing that I was born. I'm not happy. I'm happy I was born, right? And it's a beautiful thing that in spite of coming from these Satanists, I came into the world pure. I came into the world wanting to make art, act, model. I was born with some great gifts, you know? What is unfortunate is that it was exploited by those closest to me. Um, I never liked my family, and I wanted to enter the film industry because I wanted to be free. From a very early age, I remember Ethan Hawke introduced me to CRM management, who's also in the Epstein files, which was my money manager. And Judith was always involved with my finances, you know?
So she was the one making the decisions about
Yes.
your career? Mm.
Yeah. And you know, I never saw my earnings. I did not live well, you know? I was constantly being shuttled either in a 300 square foot apartment or where the literal room I was being trafficked to Weinstein or like cheap Airbnbs. I was never while they were like going to the opera, you know, and
Mhm.
Judith was always involved with my finances, and these people had complete control over my life. They had control over the doctors I saw. That was a big part of how they did this trafficking. You know, they took me to corrupt doctors who gave me Valiums. Um, you know, they wanted to
Yes.
gaslight me. They wanted to gaslight me, which they did forever. So people would think I was a hot mess, you know, and not believe my allegations.
So take me back, Paz.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the apartment your mother rented in Tribeca and what that period was like for you, including the times you felt watched or monitored?
Yes, I was always being watched. Let's just say, okay, for one, first we lived in Soho at
Hmm.
421 West Broadway. You know, what do I remember now after a lot of time focusing on my healing? You know, I would say I even did some very deep prenatal therapy where I realized that my father wanted me and my mother didn't want me and she tried to abort me, right? And that my father was in love with me, like, even before I was born, and that I was almost born with the intention of being, like, some sort of satanic ritual, you know what I mean?
Yes, yes, exactly.
So
Absolutely.
so I would say the abuse with my father started very early, right? And he treated me like a doll, you know, um, bought me he was a very rich man, I come from the Spanish aristocracy, right?
Hmm.
So he would, put me in, you know, dress me up and get me drunk and do things to me. But in comparison to the way my mother treated me, I actually preferred my father's attention. As sick as that is,
Yes, yes,
because she was so jealous and she still is jealous of me. You know, it's like, come on, they're fucking old now. You've exploited me every which way possible. Can they fucking settle with me and just fuck off? Let me, you know, do you know how many men have wanted to marry me? These people have sabotaged my life and any chance at freedom, including my relationships with men, including, you know, what they did to my career, you know, what they did to they literally went on the internet and had, you know, put up ugly pictures of me. I'm a very beautiful woman.
of
It's
course you are.
it's been humiliating for me what they've done to my life, you know? And I've just, you know, I didn't come into the industry like many people do from a place of ego, like I need to be famous, everyone needs to give me attention. I genuinely got into the arts because I wanted to heal.
Yes.
But then the horrible part about it was it, I'll get to the next, sorry, your question. So then we moved to Tribeca. Who lives in
Hmm.
Tribeca? Weinstein. He happened to be our neighbor on Greenwich Street, right? Miramax
Hmm.
has his studio there. So I believe I was about 13 years old, and I was walking down the street, and Billy Hopkins was his casting director, and there was a movie called The Cider House Rules, which ironically, this is so ironic. Have you seen the movie?
No, no, I haven't.
It's actually a beautiful movie, and I play Mary Agnes, and it's about orphans, which is kind of ironic since I'm an orphan. And I play Mary Agnes, and what I do remember was even from a young age, I was very eccentric. I wore leopard print, and I was, because my father was already sexualizing me,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know, it's a trauma response. I will
Yes.
note that I don't think anything, I'm not one of these people that are coming out and speaking about things that have happened to me. I still enjoy my sexuality. I still enjoy modeling. What I don't like is that I was trafficked by my family. You understand?
Yes. Yes. Past, did you have anyone that you can turn to?
My animals, like literally, that's it.
Are you speaking for now
No,
or
in my childhood as
yes?
well, my
Mhm.
animals. I honestly, now I live on a farm and I have like 1 million dogs, and horses. Some people I know may not understand my point of view on the world, but after I have witnessed such depravity and what I have seen people do for a dime, instead of going their direction because I wasn't going to fight fire with fire,
Mhm.
I went a spiritual direction. You understand?
Yes, yes.
I've devoted my life to Christ. And for years, when they put me in mental hospitals to silence me, what do you think I did in those places? I wasn't crazy. It wasn't like I was talking to myself. I picked up a Bible. And
Okay.
that's how I've survived this.
So, when did you meet Weinstein?
So I was telling
At
you,
that time?
at that time, 13, we moved from Soho to Tribeca,
Mhm.
and I was walking down the street, and I believe Billy Hopkins saw me, or perhaps Weinstein. What I do know, I was shortly thereafter casted in the Cider House Rules, which Miramax produced.
Mhm.
Simultaneously, Judith Bruce had 3 apartments on Greenwich Street: 3D, 3C, 3B. Now, we're talking years of corruption and cover up to cover up this initial crime. I have evidence in writing, something Judith denies today, in her words, that she didn't want me speaking to the New York Times because she rented the 3B apartment to Miramax in the early 90s. Now, at what age was I in the early 90s? 13.
13 years.
At what age did I do the Cider House Rules produced by Weinstein? 13. See?
Yes.
So, I also have a statement from my friend who wishes to remain anonymous, but I believe will testify need be, that the 3 apartments were connected, and he rented the 3B when I was probably around 17, and that Judith offered to lower his rent if he spied on me. So this kind of invasion of my privacy, trafficking, people being paid to watch over me started happening in my childhood. It's just so horrifying, you know? Um, so I have these things in writing. What I do know is Judith has since sold the 3B apartment to a Chinese people. I
Mm-hmm.
do know in 2017 during the Me Too movement, I have the police photos. She built walls in front of those doors to cover up her crime. There's a famous Tina Barney photo she can't get taken off the web where you see-through glass doors. You can't deny
Yes,
it. It's
yes,
in a
yes.
museum. And I have all the evidence to back up my allegations. Okay, and I will note for the last time, I went to a journalist long before the Me Too
Me Too
movement.
movement. Mhm.
I got fired from Boardwalk Empire and I got blackmailed into making Nurse 3D, and I got hit by a truck.
Tell me about that experience. Tell me what happened that day.
Well, I mean, it's so traumatic to talk about, but I will just say I didn't want to make the movie. And at this point, what I would hope, I will just note, sorry to get off track. When the
No,
Epstein files were released the other day, okay, very clearly there was a voice memo from Judith Bruce to Jeffrey Epstein, which was listened by the government on August 25th, 2019. Listened by the government. That doesn't mean it was received by the government on that date. It could have been received a lot sooner because what I do know is apparently Jeffrey Epstein was murdered in August 10th, I believe, 2019. I
mhm.
happen to think he might still be alive in Israel. I actually believe that. Um, but what I will say is this lunatic, Judith Bruce, who has not left me in peace for 41 fucking years. I filed for orders of protection in Spain 4 years ago, by the way. There's an investigation in France right now, and there's a case in Madrid for the trafficking that happened 4 years ago. Writes me a letter. I was told to have no contact with these Satanists because they're dangerous. Say, her phone is tapped and blah, 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 blah. I make sure because I have dealt with this family my entire life and, you know, let's say easily over a dozen assassination attempts. I make sure to screenshot everything. That voicemail has been taken down. Even in the voice memo, it says from Judith, and it's her number, 571-7378. It says, is she speaking about Epstein or Weinstein? It's very clear. And it's very clear that it was from Judith Bruce to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the government has got to stop protecting criminals.
Paz, did you ever meet him? Did you ever meet Epstein?
Well, in the files, he says he was at a party. He saw this actress, Paz de la Huerta, and she doesn't look very healthy. I mentioned a few times in the Epstein files, and I made sure to screenshot everything because I'm well aware. I'm well aware of the kind of people I'm dealing with. I'll just, since we have a little, some time, I'm going to tell you all the connections in the Epstein files to my family.
Tell
My
me, tell me.
my
We hope all. Tell
father's
me what.
best
Don't.
friend, and mind you, I was a victim of my father as well, is a man named Arnaud Brunel. You know who Jean-Luc Brunel is? This man is synonymous with Epstein. Arnaud Brunel is his brother. My dad lives with him in France. Now, to say that my family is tied to Epstein is an understatement. These people are one and the same. And Christina, my godmother, she tapped her mother's phone lines and stole $600 million. What everybody knows about Epstein is all his money was stolen too. These people come from a school of thought that is satanic. They normally go to Ivy League schools and they're trained in corruption. This is what they do. And they all know one another and they're all associated with one another. In the Epstein files, Jeffrey, I read the emails and I've screenshotted everything. He said he was interested in buying the property on 90th Street that belonged to Aimee. Aimee was my great aunt. Christina was her ugly daughter who stole all that money. And then he said he was interested in buying the property in Palm Beach, which Christina also stole. There's a million connections. Arnaud Brunel, I filed a lawsuit in France against my father and Judith for incest because my mother also sexually abused me. Arnaud Brunel is synonymous with Jean-Luc Brunel. C'est ton frère. It's his brother. This is Uncle Arnie. This is Uncle Arnie. So now I have to think, with the release of all this exposed, when I have suffered probably a dozen assassination attempts, of course Epstein has been behind it.
Paz, tell me about that day, because I want the listeners to know what happened on that set.
When the truck hit me?
Yes.
Well, when I got to the filming, I remember my acting coach at the time said, this film is not worth your life. And I literally fought with my manager at the time, Evan Haney, and I said, I don't want to do the movie.
And the reason was?
And they blackmailed me because, yes, I did have a drug problem. I had a
Mhm.
drug problem. How could I not have a fucking drug problem? I was being trafficked to Harvey Weinstein. I had to cope with my pain somehow,
Of
you know?
course. Of course.
So they said if I didn't do the movie, they'd blacklist me from Hollywood and tell everyone I was a drug addict. In hindsight, I wish I said, okay, fuck it. Tell them that I'm not doing the movie. Like, I wish I had done that if I could go back in time. Because it wasn't worth my life. But
And
sorry, go on.
what did exactly happen?
Well, during the making of the movie, the director, who was more like an assassin, Doug Arianovsky, verbally abused me. Um, you know, uh, Throughout the whole film, bullied me. There was Goli Sami, who was on set, who in my podcast has been a reoccurring character and henchman, more like a drug pusher. Because as long as they could control the narrative and have people think that I was just some strung out junkie, you know, they could get away with this insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, everyone around Goli just dies suddenly. So I remember the day of the truck, I it was like it was raining. And mind you, let's just note, I tried to get out of the film and they blackmailed me. And then I felt pressured. So you have to understand, this is a Lionsgate movie. My managers at the time told me, oh, but it's a lot of money. Money I never saw. And of course, my self-destructive tendencies got worse, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I was doing something I didn't want to do.
Yes. Yes. You were
So,
trying to numb yourself.
of
I
course I
understand that.
was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the day of the truck, it was like there was like this tunnel, and it was all so unnecessary, the scene. Like, why should a speeding ambulance be going through a tunnel directed towards me, an actress, and another actress in pouring rain? This sounds strange. And not only that, they had me holding an umbrella, and the other actress, Katrina, was frightened, I remember. And they had me on the side of where the truck would pass. So I would be the one that would get injured. And I remember the first take happened and it just skid my arm. I was very frightened and I didn't want to go again. I didn't want to go again. And this Doug Arianovsky character, this guy was like a big bully. He had been like a first AD on those Resident Evil movies. And, you know, he's just a screamer. And I had to go again. And the second take, and it's on film because I bought the footage during the trial, and it's the only reason the case moved forward. It literally clips me, clips the umbrella, drags me 10 feet in the air, and I fall on my back. And I had that experience when you die. You know, I died.
Yes.
I saw the light, and I saw my innate, and I saw how beautiful I was as a human being. And I wanted to live, actually. And then I woke up and I was just surrounded by these people and nobody did anything. And I
Nobody.
remember looking up and seeing Doug. And when I stood up, he looked at me like he was upset I wasn't dead. And then I'm in touch with Baxter Mary, who was the first AD, who has called me a few times throughout the years, almost prepared to give an honest statement, right? This guy knows what happened. And I recorded our conversations because throughout time, I've learned how to protect myself. I've had to. I'm a survivor.
Of course. What happened after that, Paz?
After that, I wanted to go to the hospital. Of course I did. And then they asked Goli to come to me. And Goli said I couldn't go to the hospital because they'd find drugs in my system. Not only that, Doug said I had to go again. So not only did I not go to the hospital, I did another take. And like I said, he looked like he was upset I wasn't dead. And then I remember getting back to the hotel that night and soaking in a bath, and my body was black. I mean, it's so, and this was an assassination attempt. It is. I don't want to go into the whole timeline right now, but
Yes.
I've gone to some legitimate lawyers, not Aaron Filler, since this all happened, and that was a hit on my life. It's that simple. And now I have, even in writing, only 2022, Judith offering people money to give up my location because she put a hit on my life. So what I want to know, with all this insanity, why hasn't the FBI just put them away already? Why am I, the person who has suffered all these injustices, living in hiding, still fearing for my life, financially spending all my money on lawyers because I have to protect myself? I only recently stopped getting death threats from their employees in Spain, and they tried to sue me for slander, so I had to get a lawyer in Madrid. I deserve a more fulfilling life.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's been very emotional lately
I know.
because, you know, I've been going through this for so long. I've been so brave. And I'm tired, you know, I'm tired. I haven't deserved any of this insanity. You know, there are plenty of very beautiful women on earth, very sensual, very smart, very talented women that aren't raised by their fathers, that aren't trafficked by their families, that have loving and good homes. You understand?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
Yeah.
Paz, tell me about Weinstein.
Well, I mean, that happened before the truck because, like I said, I broke down that the apartments were connected. If the police and the FBI finally did call me and they're looking into Judith and Christina, in a perfect world, I would like them to interview Harvey Weinstein and just flat out ask him, did this woman sell you her daughter? Right? Um, I think they made porn. You know, Miramax rented the 3B. They certainly made porn, which I haven't seen, but Weinstein would have seen. And then I remember a corrupt therapist whose records were all of a sudden missing during the Me Too movement, Suan Piliero, convinced me to move back into the 3C apartment during the second season of Boardwalk Empire. And it is under my belief that Weinstein, in a very perverse way, wanted to have me in the room he spied on me as a child. You understand? Like it was some sort of fetish. And I do know from speaking with like my new friend Ryan that Judith probably watched him watch me and that all sorts of blackmail went on. And he raped me twice and he would have come back for more. And I went to a journalist called Alexis Last. I have the transcription. And I told her to shut down the story because I was very frightened. And that was a long time before the Me Too movement. But knowing how corrupt and greedy people are, who am I to have even trusted Alexis Last? How do we know she didn't tell Weinstein? And that's the reason I got fired from Boardwalk and blackmailed into making that movie. When you're dealing with people with this kind of money and power that want to hurt you, you can't trust anyone.
Of course.
But I
Paz,
have
when you
the
look
transcription. I have the
Mhm.
transcription. Yeah.
When you look at the broader Hollywood system, what do you think allows abuse to be normalized?
Well, now, I will just say, um, unfortunately, I think there are two kinds of people that come into the entertainment industry and the artistic world. I think there are genuinely people that work from a very power-hungry, ego-driven place, like Judith, like a lot of actors and actresses who are very insecure, who want to be famous. And I think they're the worst kind of people on earth. And then there are other people, like I love Jack Nicholson was a very dear friend of mine. Gina Rowlands is a great actress. Then there are different kinds of talents, who genuinely are artists and they want to create. The problem is that the business side of not only the acting industry, but also the modeling industry and also the art industry is that many times the people that, make money and profit exploit you. I remember Jean-Michel Basquiat. Oh no, I think it was Rene Ricard, who was a friend of mine. He said something like, you used gifts God to be free and they used it to enslave you. I paint, like these are my paintings.
And they're so beautiful.
Thank you. Like I still make art. I still want to act. I'm about to do a movie. I still need to model. But, these people have not, one, left me in peace. Two, settled. Let's just call it what it is. I never
Mhm.
even alone saw my earnings. I mean, I have evidence. All my records were sent to 311 Greenwich Street, apartment 3D in 2018. That's where Judith lives. I don't live there. That's my money. And I need a very good New York civil lawyer to, alone what they committed from a financial perspective is called fraud. I want to get my money. I want to move on with my life. I want to have my own family, some babies, be happy. I deserve it.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
You know, they did it because they were jealous. Like, if you want to just break down the psychology, my mother is envious because my father is in love with me.
So you've described being heavily medicated
Yes, they
at
did.
one point.
Yeah.
How did that medication affect your clarity and functioning?
I mean, it's horrible. I never wanted to take those pills. That started very young. Judith started taking me to psychiatrists at a very young age. You know, they gave me everything. Risperdal, Valium. I mean, everything. And I don't have any mental illness. I don't have one pill in my system now. I don't even take anything to sleep. I don't drink alcohol, and I'm not even in AA. Like, I'm just like very spiritual. And I decided with the gravity of my situation that my clarity and health is the most important thing to
Yes.
me. How
So
did
so when
what did it do? It was
good.
horrible. And I will say that when the truck hit me, I had a spiritual experience, and I knew I wanted to live, and I knew I wanted to be my innate. And that means, whole human
Yes.
being without drugs and alcohol. I was only willingly a drug addict in my early 20s. After that, it was all them. It was them. And, the
Mhm,
truck
mhm.
was the first assassination attempt. During the Me Too movement, I had a brain injury. They blackmailed the lawyer before the third hearing of Lionsgate because Judith was afraid I'd get that money and be free to blackmail me into taking 300 milligrams of Seroquel, which made me fall, black, hit my face, caused a dent in my face. I have an MRI to prove that I was missing half my brain. That took me 7 years to recover from. No, these people are evil and they're satanic. And I finally, once and for all, it has to end. Look, now the voicemail of Judith is taken off the files. I screenshotted it. I've screenshotted everyone's name I saw there and their conversations. The FBI, and even if it wasn't there, I have so much evidence. I have emails between Judith and Christina, Aaron Filler, the corrupt psychiatrist they employed for millions of years to drug me. I have so much evidence. I want this story. I want this part of my life to be done. You understand?
Of course. So when did you begin trusting your own perception again?
Well, I would say 5 years ago in Madrid, my best friend James, very amazing man. They never wanted me to do this medicinal plant called iboga.
Mhm,
And part of their way to keep me sick was by controlling the purse strings, right?
mhm.
So you know, if they kept sending me to fraudulent clinics, you know, fraudulent rehabs and, you know, you know,
Yes.
corruption, they could, putting me in mental hospitals, no one would know the truth. Iboga, finally, my best friend paid for it in Madrid. November 17th, 2020, I saw my dad. I started to have pain in my vagina, right? Why? He was coming into my room at night. A grown woman. This is only 5 years ago. And James paid for it, and it was real. And it only cost $900. And I pieced together everything. I pieced together who wanted to hurt me and why. I pieced together that their big payout was going to be the Weinstein settlement. They did everything to corrupt my case so that I couldn't testify against Weinstein and to put me in a psychiatric hospital the rest of my life or dead. And I took this medicine on about 5 Android telephones. I started writing my timeline. No access to money, still being trafficked. The only place I was safe was church. I went to church every day and I just sat there and I asked God for the answers. Yeah, this is how it started. This is how I started to gain my freedom.
What did you understand about yourself that you weren't aware of before?
In church,
Yeah, and after the Boga experience.
oh, well, I was still being trafficked. So I was still being violated at night. I have evidence. I've been breaking my story down on TikTok because I don't know what's taking my book so long. A lot of people don't want my book to come out. A lot of people don't want my book published. And they had me, and I even have it in writing, in an under 50 euro dollar a night hotel. My dad and other men, I was sharing it with one of their traffickers, Almudena, some girl with Down syndrome. I didn't want to sleep alone at night because of what was happening to me in my sleep. But she, instead of protecting me, took the money and let people rape in my sleep. This is only 5 years ago. Okay. And you're talking about people who had control over my life, who have a net worth of about $600 million. Why the fuck is Paz having to live in a hotel that's under 50 euros a night? There's no making sense of that unless you're evil. It's evil what they've done. So I went to church because it was the only place I was safe. And the iboga started to work. And I started to piece together things and write this timeline. And it started to recalibrate my brain and get me off the pharmaceuticals they had put me on my whole life. And I knew I had to run away, which was what the only ethical therapist I had in my life, Michael Rebel, had told me to do my entire life. He said, run away. So I knew the Weinstein settlement was coming in, and they were planning to steal that because Aaron Filler was always Judith's lawyer. I knew I had to run away okay, the night of September 10th, and I was just in Madrid. I had dinner with the
Hmm.
people that managed my father's money in Spain. And I told them what my dad was doing. They spat at me on the street. I knew my life was in danger. I went to a nightclub called Malasaña, and I started asking strangers to sleep at their houses. I said, I'm not safe. And I have testimonies. Nobody helped me. I went back to the hotel room. I woke up, my body was black. I have those pictures and I have, some testimonies. Most of those people have disappeared. And a lot of people know things that haven't come forward yet that I'm hoping will do the right thing. And then a few friends sent me some money and I ran away to LA and I removed Aaron Filler and I took that money to get safe. But the assassination attempts did not stop. The harassment, especially by Judith, did not stop. It's exhausting. And they are relentless and they are evil. And honestly, it's like in the past 4 years, I took that money. I initially got an apartment in Madrid by the Retiro,
Hmm.
and I couldn't stay there because my mother was paying these thugs money to find me to put me in a mental hospital the rest of my life. So I had to, and I have, it's just horrible. I know it's a lot to digest. So
Yes.
I ran away and I said, I have to heal. And I just tried to focus on my healing, which I did for a while. I rescued the paintings, which they tried to steal. I had a show in Paris. They wanted to take away my voice because if they
Mm.
took away my voice, nobody would know the truth.
Yes, exactly.
So I rescued those paintings and had the show in Paris, tempted to sell my art. What do people expect me to do? Become a prostitute? It's not going to happen. I'm very talented and I've suffered a lot of injustice, and it's my time to see my justice.
So, what was the turning point? Was that the turning point when you decided to distance yourself from the family?
Well, when I took the iboga and it made me piece together everything and ran away, that was a turning point, yes. But, you know, in life, there are so many different turning points because, you know, even since I took that money, which certainly wasn't the rest enough to last me the rest of my life, and it's certainly nothing in compared to what they've stolen from me alone. I attempted to have my book published. I attempted to do some modeling work. I did a few movies, and I keep running into the same problems over and over again, which is corruption, which is very evil, satanic people who are all in the Epstein files want to silence me.
So there was never someone that could protect you,
Well, at certain
with
points I
whom you
had
felt safe.
different men offer to, and what I find so cruel about what they've done to my life is, you know how many times I had boyfriends and they had control over my finances and like that goalie would reappear and just start a fake fight to drive me crazy to put me in an asylum, and how many men they've humiliated me in front of these evil women. Like, why couldn't they have just let me have just go off with a number of boyfriends and just fuck off? There has been no end to their crimes against me. And at
Yes.
this point, I want to see all financial retribution and I want them behind bars. And honestly, I'm a very good person with very little resources. I have helped rehabilitate other victims of sex trafficking. And I've also rescued all these beautiful dogs.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell me, what legal outcomes are you actively pursuing?
Oh, yes. So right now there is an investigation in France
Mm-hmm.
currently against Judith and my father, but it primarily focuses on the incest that happened in my childhood. Now, I'm looking into other lawyers in France, though I do like my lawyer, Anne-Claire Lejeune, because the situation is bigger than that, especially now that I've pieced together that Arnaud Brunel, Uncle Arnie, is my father's best friend. So this is the man that has financed Epstein. When you put that together, now I have no doubt that Arnaud Brunel and my father, in their chateau in Normandy, where they lived together, probably conspired a number of these assassination attempts on me. And the police need to look into that as well. So I will probably open up another case in France about that. In Madrid, I just testified for the trafficking that happened 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my aunt found me a good lawyer who's familiar with the family and knows how evil they are. So that's happening. And then I have a GoFundMe because I need to definitely this year pursue for the fraud alone because I discovered it November 2022. It's 2026. I need to file this year for the conspiracy fraud to, God willing, recover as much of the money they stole and to go against CRM management and Judith and Christina for that. And then most recently, the FBI has called me a few times and they're investigating Judith and Christina in New York.
Mm-hmm. Pass, also another thing. Tell me, what parts of your story do you think people usually misunderstand? Is
Well,
there
I
something
was,
you'd like to
yeah,
clarify?
okay, sorry. I was certainly gaslit for a very long time.
Mhm,
You know, I will say that I think with my story that might set it apart from different stories is that my traffickers were women that want to be known as saints, and they were jealous of me. Okay, they did what they did because they were jealous. I have dealt with a lot of envy in my life, and my traffickers, most of them were women. There were some men, but most of them were women. And, alone, I will say what they did as misunderstood. I will make something very clear to the audience. I have
mhm.
only had control over my life in the last 4 years. So anything that happened prior
Yes.
to the way people have seen me recently in the media is a lie.
Mhm.
That's what I'll say.
So, with everything coming into public view now, do you feel more hopeful that systemic abuse is being exposed, or more cautious?
I feel more hopeful. I feel more hopeful that the world is finally ready for the truth. And yeah, I do feel more hopeful. And also as a human being, my goals in my life and what moves me as a human being, just because of the things I've seen in the world and in my life has changed. I will never stop painting. I will never stop acting. I will never stop modeling. But I'm only interested in working with people that have a moral code of ethics.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I will also note, I would love to be on the cover of Playboy again, but I want to see the money I make.
Do you feel your art is another way of reclaiming your voice?
Yeah, my art got me my voice back.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I'm
So, what
about to do a
themes?
movie and I
Uh-huh.
would love, I'm not I am a very feminine woman. I like male attention. I like handsome male attention. I don't have a problem with that. I don't like that I was sold as a sex slave by my family to Harvey Weinstein and to my father. Have I
Yes.
enjoyed my boyfriends in my life? Of course I have. And I would love to do more photo shoots, do more modeling, but on my terms, see the money I make. I never saw my earnings.
Yes, because I believe that that's was their way of controlling you, right?
Yeah, as long as they had control over my finances,
Mhm,
they could control the narrative.
mhm. So, what themes keep appearing in your paintings, and
Oh, okay.
what do they reveal about where you are in your life right now?
Well, I'm very spiritual, so this next show, I'm not going to give a date for my safety,
Hmm, hmm.
but it will be in Madrid, which is my way of telling my family I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. I've never committed any crimes. And it's called aferrarse a la fe, which means hold on to faith, because
Beautiful.
that's how I survived it. And these different paintings, this is Oshun, who is the goddess of the sweet waters,
Hmm.
and she's a goddess of fertility, love, compassion, and beauty. This is Yamenja, who is the ocean, and she's mother. Orishas is Afro-Brazilian religion, which is all about taking elements of nature and using it to better your life.
Beautiful.
This
Beautiful.
this is a man I was deeply in love with, Enki,
Hmm.
who is a Sumerian god, right?
They're so
And
beautiful.
thank you. And this is Mother Mary with a baby, because I would love to be a mother. I really want to have just my own family, and you know.
Yes.
And this is Aphrodite.
Wow.
When my father was doing what he was doing 5 years ago, I was in so much physical pain, and I would go to the river and I would call upon Aphrodite to heal me. So I've never lost my faith in God. So my art and my work as an actress is reflected
In everything you create.
in
Yes.
everything I
Hmm.
create.
Hmm. So tell me, you've set up a GoFundMe.
Yeah, it's exhausting. These lawyers are very expensive. And when you're fighting such corrupt people that have unlimited amount of money, it's
I can
I
imagine.
have I have felt incredibly powerless. Well, I won't say that because I've never lost my faith in God, and God is greater than their evil. But I need to be able to pay the retainers of these lawyers. I'm too vulnerable if I can't. And I deserve a more fulfilling life than traveling to go do a movie to pay for lawyers. I just and I also want to heal, even recently in the last 5 months, like even if all this Epstein shit didn't come out, like the Iboga had gotten me off all the pharmaceuticals. It really helped a lot. But then I was only taking like a little bit of benzodiazepam at night to sleep. And like last year, I started to gain some weight and my period wasn't regular. So I went to the doctor and they said that it was this pill that was stopping it. And something very important to me is having a family and also, my beauty, which is inner. So I detox myself off of it. And my period comes every month. I'm very healthy. I lost all that weight. But I will say that those benzos is how my father did what he did to me in my sleep. So even if all this, evidence of Arnaud Brunel being my dad's best friend and my whole family connected to Epstein wasn't out, lately I have a lot of nightmares because, a healer said to me, the safer you are, the more you'll remember.
That's true. Because when the body and the mind calms down, it's when everything, all the thoughts and come to the surface and all the memories.
Yeah, so I would like alone, I have a very good therapist, eternally grateful for him. I live in a very, peaceful place, which I've needed. But I would like to do iboga again because I have a lot of healing to do. Of course I do. I try to
Paz.
remember the things that the person who knew me the most,
Mhm.
who loved me the most, would have said to me, who was Michael Rebel, my therapist. And he told me before he died that I was to become a healer. And I've always, approached even my acting coach I just met with, you know,
Mhm.
acting is healing. And I've always approached this profession and all of my artistic endeavors as a healer. But if I were to see all financial retribution, which I deserve for a number of crimes, I would like to have orphanages.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So, Paz, is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners? Something that you really want them to know?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
It's my
I will
honor.
just, I will just ask your listeners to keep me in your prayers. If you can't donate to my GoFundMe or buy a painting or consider me for work, I am a bit fragile these days. I wake up crying. It's horrible that my family, my own blood, had put me through this. And I just want you to keep me in your prayers because I deserve better.
We surely will. Paz, tell me, where can somebody find your paintings? How can we help?
My gallery is Rukowski 68. It's in Paris. And you can I get 50% if you buy it. And just call the Paris office. I have to keep my acting manager private because Judith also has offered managers and agents money to harm me, and I have to protect myself.
Yes. Paz, thank you so, so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your story. For those who want to support her as she continues to reclaim her independence and pursue her legal project, she has a GoFundMe page. The link is in the episode description. Your support helps her keep building her life on her own terms and honors the strength it takes to speak her truth. As we always say, ego was here, you were here, and that's enough.